Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. It's been a while since we did this. This is going to be the final episode of the year. It's been quite a year, and we have quite a year coming up ahead as well. So I hope you're all doing very well. And in the coming year, 2024, there's going to be a lot more of these interactive live streams, the Ask Abhijit show. We're going to do a lot more of these, and we're going to have a lot of possibly impromptu live streams as well. So we'll see about that. Now, let's see who all is there on the live chat. Let's see who all is there. I can see Bye Bye SG, Indo Aryan, Harshit Bhadoria, Lone Ranger, Melvin, really now, Geopolitical Dubai. Have a nice day. Rahul 2004, Guru Vishnu Kurra, Zed Zayan, Sami Baheti, Tejo Meg, Harpreet Singh, Shushruth, Thakur, Pavan Kumar Singh Base, Strictly South African, Srijan Panikar, Vaishnav, Ajay Kumar Akula, Vanshika Patidar, Deepak Singh Rajput, Forum Kacha, GK Joseph Stalin, Shivraj Singh Rathore, Monish Sabrinath, Pretraj, Totan Chaudhary, Anushka Angampalli, Nikhil, Volcano, Manish Chaudhary, Siddhant, Banot, Komal, Chinmay, Martian, Threadripper, Bow Divas Pachi, yes indeed. Surya Pavan, Shashank Hegde, Ritik Tyagi, Aman, Vakil, Shekhar, Yasir, Akash Dikshit, Shivam Singh, Panik, Aaron Yeager, Dylan, Tejo Meg, Shubham Adhikari, Saurabh Badoria, hello, PS, really now, Rahul, Chinmay, who else? Kenneth Tan from the Philippines, hello sir. Technical advisor, Salman Souza, Guru Vishnu, Shubham, Dylan, Shravani, Messi, SG, Raj Bora, Dr. Jaishankar, Supremacy, hello sir, hello ma'am. Vedansh, Varun, Ahwan, Melvin, and lots of people, Sayan, Threadripper, Jasmine Raj Singh. Okay, I'm gonna stop greeting everybody. Revti, Jite, Raju, Ratan, Nabanita Das. Okay, let me stop greeting everybody. That's what I'll do all day. So, okay, uh, I won't be able to greet all of you individually, but you have my greetings. And thank you so much for being on this live stream. I really appreciate your viewership and your support. So, with that said, let's get into the questions. I can see Rajat Chopra as well after, yeah, good to see you. So let's get into questions. You have questions, you ask me now, and I will start taking those questions. All right, let's see. Let's take this question. Okay, geopolitics. There's a lot happening right now. There's a lot happening in the Middle East. There's a lot happening elsewhere as well. Lone Ranger says, what do you think our response should be regarding the Houthi attacks? Look, it's something that does affect us, right? The Houthi attacks. Okay, so that we understand what's happening, we go to the map. The map is our best friend. So where's the map? Let's find the map. Here is the map. One second, let's put that on the screen. Here we have it. Let me bring it to a different place so that it's, yeah, here we go. So this is the map. Now we're talking about the Houthi attacks, right? So where is this happening? So it's happening at the intersection of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. This is a choke point called the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb. Okay, there are these very important choke points that are extremely critical in geopolitics. I'll tell you what these are. One is the Strait of Gibraltar. You see this choke point here between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea? That's an important choke point. Then you have the Suez Canal. It's a very narrow canal, so that's another choke point. Then you have the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb here, okay, between the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. There's the Strait of Hormuz between the Sea of Saurashtra and the Persian Gulf. And then you have the strait over here, the Strait of Malacca. These are the most important, vital, critical geopolitical choke points, because you do something over here, you choke off traffic, shipping traffic over here, you're going to bring much of the global economy to a halt. Okay, so what's happening is that the Houthis, the Ansar Allah faction in Yemen, who have been at the receiving end of, for a decade and a half, of of war that is primarily done by Saudi Arabia on the behest of the US, right, and also by the US. So they have been fighting these forces for a decade and a half. And I have a very interesting podcast on this channel, a podcast with Dr. Isa Bloomy, which goes into detail about the situation in Yemen and what's been happening there, right? So the Ansarullah faction, who are based most likely in southern Yemen, they have decided to choke off this strait, the Strait of Bab al Mandeb. Here you go, Bab al Mandeb Strait, and they have missiles, they have drones, they have attacked Israeli ships, they have attacked possibly other ships as well, possibly, I'm not sure, Israeli ships definitely, and they have said that they will only allow Russian ships to transit through this place, through the strait. And this is an extremely important strait because much of the traffic that travels between east and west passes through this strait, and then it goes through the Suez Canal. So if you choke off this strait, Egypt is going to take a huge hit because much of their economy depends on the Suez Canal, and the global economy will take a huge hit. So then ships, container ships, transportation ships, cargo ships will be forced to go all the way around the Cape of Good Hope, like in the ancient days. And that's going to increase costs, and it's going to increase costs everywhere. So that's the deal. So that's what's happening. That's what the Yemeni Houthis are doing. They have choked off this Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, and the US has sent a task force, a couple of aircraft carrier task forces they've sent to bring the situation back to normal. But let's see how that goes. As of today, it's still a work in progress, and right now the Houthis are successfully choking off this strait. So the question is, what about us? What should we do about this? Look, it does affect us in India. Okay, much of the shipping, let's talk about oil. Okay, every nation depends on energy, and we are buying oil from various sources, including Russia. And much of this Russian oil that we are acquiring comes through this Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. But if it comes to Russian ships, it's going to be fine because the Yemenis, the Houthis won't target those ships. If it comes through other ships, then the Houthis could target them. So it could affect our energy supply, right? Oil supply. So that's a problem we could face. And if that happens, prices could eventually go up to a certain extent in India. Prices of normal, regular commodities, right? Because oil powers transportation, and transportation, it affects the price of commodities, tomatoes, onions, and whatnot, right? Standard stuff. So it could affect us, right? So that's the deal. So what should we do? Look, even though it does affect us and it has the potential to affect us, this is not our fight. From India's perspective, we have to be very clear. This is not our fight. We should encourage the sides, both the sides, whatever sides are involved in this, to come to some kind of understanding, some kind of agreement, some kind of resolution on the negotiating table, over a meal, over a few drinks if they want to, instead of fighting it out. We should encourage them to do that, but we should not get involved directly in this matter because it's not our fight. It's between the West and the Yemenis. The Yemenis, the Houthis, they have been at the receiving end for a long time. I said a decade and a half. It actually goes back to the 1970s, the 1980s, even before that. So this is an anti-imperialist force, the Ansarullah faction in Yemen, and they are fighting the West, and they are showing what they can do. And obviously they are supported by Iran. They have Iran's support, and it's not just verbal support like we in India, we love verbal support. Oh, somebody said something nice to me and that's support. That's not support. They have material support, most likely from Iran. So that's the deal. So I would say that we should, from India's perspective, we should encourage both the sides, all the sides, to come to a peaceful agreement, and a cessation of hostilities. But we should not get involved directly in this matter at all. Even the Chinese are involved, and they're sitting there and watching things happen. They have a few ships in this region. They have the Chinese have a naval base in Djibouti. Okay, I've shown this in the past where the naval base is located. I'll not do that again because it will take too much time. But there are a few Chinese ships also deployed, warships that are deployed in this region, and they have ignored distress calls from ships that have been hit by the Houthis. So the Chinese are essentially just sitting and watching, and they're enjoying what's happening because it kind of helps them. So that's the deal right now. So my simple point is India should not get involved directly in this matter. We should encourage all sides to negotiate, maybe facilitate negotiations if possible, but not more than that, because it's not our fight. All right. Okay. Let's take a different question. We took that. Uh, Bye bye says, is Dawood dead? Look, I have no idea. There are reports of all kinds that come out in the media, that the terrorist Dawood was poisoned apparently by someone, but there's no official word on it because his whereabouts have been. He probably has been residing in Karachi, but there's no photograph of him that's come out for the past 20-30 years. So there's been this very tight clamp down on any information that comes out regarding this particular terrorist, okay, who is sheltered and harbored by Pakistan. In the past, there's been speculation that the ISI had bumped him off because he was becoming a liability or whatever, right? So we don't know. Is he dead? Is he not? I personally obviously only have access to information that's in the public domain. I don't have any access to classified information, so I can only say that I do not know. Maybe, may not, but that's the situation, right? Volcano says, why is the American education system better than the Indian education system? Look, today the American education system is going down backwards. It's going to the dogs. Okay, look at what's happening in Harvard. The dean or whatever that lady is of Harvard, she has been caught red-handed plagiarizing, and she has this long history of plagiarizing going back to her student days, and yet Harvard is brazening it out and saying that what she has done is right and there's nothing wrong with it. And then it sets a precedent that allows students to do the same thing and claim precedent that, look, you exonerated this lady for exactly the same thing, so you cannot now accuse me of plagiarism. So everybody's going to plagiarize now. So and we know what's happening in the US. The education system is the root cause of this epidemic of Wokism that's rampaging through the US, right? The education institutions have been taken over by the leftists and all. But look at it historically, the education system in the US was probably the best in the world because they had standards, they had high standards. Look, I have done 3 episodes of the Ask Abhijit show about the education system, what is wrong with our education system. I think it's episodes 28, 30, 32, somewhere around that episode number. Okay, check it out. I've gone into it in great detail. The education system in India is horrific. Okay, what it does is that think about what happened to Srinivas Ramanujan. The education system nearly destroyed him. He was a genius level mathematician, 1 in 100 years kind of mathematician, and the education system, they failed him in English and some other subjects, and he used to get top marks, full marks in math, but he used to fail everything else, and that's why they said that he was good for nothing. That was the colonial education system before 1947. And what do you think we have today? We have the same education system. Nothing has changed. So the education system in India is designed to turn out clerks and peons. It's designed to convert bright, intelligent, curious young children, really intelligent young children, into zombies. It's designed to turn them into clerks and peons. It's not designed to turn out leaders. It's not designed to, help the student rise to the fullest extent of his or her potential. The education system excels at seeking out and destroying talent and rewarding mediocrity. Okay, and the education system in India, it treats the staff, okay, the employees, the teachers, and the academic and non-academic staff as the true stakeholders, and the students as simply expendable cannon fodder. The purpose of an education system is to treat the student as the stakeholder, not the teacher. The teacher's job is to bring out the best in the student and prepare the student for eventually becoming a bright, young, confident adult who can go and take on the world and change the world, okay, and serve the country and society. And we do the opposite of that. So the US education system was better geared for that. I mean, we have so many fake subjects and fake courses in India. if you have a degree in home science, if you have a degree in gender studies, in women studies, what are you going to produce after you get your degree? If I have a degree, let's say in engineering, in mechanical engineering, computer engineering, whatever, I know what I can produce. You can produce something tangible for society. Once you have a degree in humanities, some humanity or whatever, what are you going to produce for society? If there's this very popular uh, degree, right? English literature. So many kids and go and take this degree in English literature. What are you going to produce after that? What are you going to produce for society? The education system is still nothing has changed. It's still the 19th century colonial British education system. We haven't changed anything, and we have this NEP and all that. Let me not go too deep into that, okay? Which really does nothing. It doesn't really change anything, okay? So that's the thing. We're gonna need drastic, deep reforms in the education system to turn it to convert it into a much better system. Okay, it's gonna hurt the so-called stakeholders who are the academic and non-academic staff who have not performed anything for a century and a half, who are simply rent seeking and leeching off the system, of the country, of the society. So deep major changes are needed, and we are nowhere towards. We have not taken any steps towards even beginning that process, in my opinion. And yeah, that's my opinion, despite everything that whatever has come out in the public about the new education policy or whatever. It does nothing. It doesn't really solve the real issues, the core issues. So yeah, the education system in the US is actually designed to produce uh, bright young adults who can really contribute to society. It's not based on writing long essays once a year in your exam. It's not about passing exams. It's about learning actual skills and using those skills to contribute something valuable to society. And the Indian education system is the opposite of that. So that's the deal, and we need to change something about it. Aman Vakil says, please tell us about the naval mutiny. How did India got India? What happened? So, look, these are like three different questions. I have spoken in depth about the the naval rebellion of 1946. I have a couple of videos on this channel. Just go to the channel, search for 1946 or naval mutiny or naval rebellion, and you will find at least 2-3 videos on my channel in which I have gone into this in depth. Okay, so I will not go answer this in depth here because I have done that. Just search for it on this channel and you'll find your answer. What happened to Subhash Chandra Bose? Watch my podcast with Anuj there. I've got how many? 3 podcasts thus far with him on this channel. Uh, Look, most likely, I am of the opinion that, and I agree with Anuj, that most likely the person known as Gumnami Baba was most likely Subhash Chandra Bose, and he lived till 1985, most likely. And to understand why he was living in anonymity and all that, you need to watch the podcast because it's a long, it's a complex topic, right? So yeah, geopolitical Dubey says French president in and Biden out. How do I see it? Look, the Americans have been trying to pressurize and squeeze India more and more. The pressure is increasing on India, and it's all geared at disrupting and influencing the 2024 general elections in India. Okay, uh, the Americans would like to see a weak government come to power in 2024 in India, and not the strong government of Prime Minister Modi. Right? They would like a weak coalition government to come in India so that they can then control India. There are lots of assets that they have within India. Let's just put it that way. I'm not going to take names or anything. If you understand, you understand. What do they say? If you know, you know. So they have many assets within India at various levels. Well, let's say, okay, without being specific or naming anyone. So they would like those assets to become more prominent and to have a more prominent role in India's future. Right now, that's impossible because of the incredible popularity of Prime Minister Modi. So they are trying to pressurize India and create all kinds of trouble for India. So Mr. Biden had been invited, he had agreed, and that's why it was announced. That's why India announced it. And then, you know, what they've accused India of targeting American US citizen terrorists on American soil, terrorists who want to blow up India's parliament and blow up Air India planes. That Pannu guy, whatever, G Pannu, that fellow who is a dual citizen of the US and Canada. He is a terrorist who is a US citizen and is acting, who is actively uh, working to harm India, and the US shelters this guy. All right, and they have accused India of allegedly uh, attempting to assassinate, murder this take out this guy on US soil. They have produced no evidence, obviously. They have made several statements and made accusations, but there's no evidence that's been forthcoming. And as a result of this, and you also have the Hardeep Singh Nijjar thing in Canada and all. Uh, so based on this, they have said that India has done crossed a certain line. What about Qasem Soleimani? What about Osama bin Laden, who the US assassinated on Pakistani soil? What about Qasem Soleimani, who they assassinated on Iraqi soil? When someone acts against the US can kill that person anywhere. They even killed their own citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, a US citizen, and his young son, his teenage son, both US citizens. The Americans did that. So the Americans, for them, rules are different. For the rest of the world, the rules are different. Even if this is true, I'm not saying it's true, this allegation that India targeted this Pannu fellow, right? So that's why the world doesn't respect the US anymore, because it's a hypocritical double standards state. They have a certain set of standards and rules for themselves, and the rest of the world has to simply obey their diktats. There's no rule of law anymore. The so-called rules-based world order is fiction. Okay, so and they would like to pressurize India more. And what's happening in India's Far East, in Manipur. I have a whole episode about that. Okay, uh, so that's that. There's that. The Manipur situation. It's a geopolitical thing. Okay, it's nothing to do. Half of Manipur, at least half of Manipur, is under foreign occupation right now. And the reason why we are not doing anything about this is that this may not be the right time. And these foreign occupiers of half of Manipur, well, look at what they are seeking. Okay, a separate nation in Christ. They are fighting three nations. Burma. They are not even Burmese, by the way. Those terrorists who are on Manipuri soil, who are squatting on Manipuri territory, Indian territory, are not even Burmese. They don't even speak the Burmese language or practice Burmese culture, by the way. They are from Yunnan in China, by the way. Okay, but so it's a complex thing. So there's the Manipur issue. Manipur is in great pain right now. Then there's Kashmir, and there's new infiltration coming in from Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And recently, Asim Munir, or whatever the name is of the new of the current Pakistani chief of staff, army boss, he was just last this week, perhaps. I think he was in the US, and he met what's his name, Blinken, and he met Victoria Nuland. If you know who she is, wherever she goes, chaos ensues. So that's the deal with the US. So Mr. Biden the US, whoever controls Biden, because Biden is, well, he's demented. He's no longer capable of taking care of himself, let alone run a country. So whoever is behind the throne, whoever is truly controlling the power in the US, have decided to pull out Biden so as to humiliate India. Okay, but well, and so India went ahead and invited Mr. Macron, and he accepted. Because I'll tell you something, the French are the only nation within NATO, okay, who have a somewhat independent, quasi-independent foreign policy. And let me tell you a secret, they do not see the US as an ally or a friend. Okay, they would like nothing more than to break free of US hegemony. France is the only nation in Europe that has a quasi-independent foreign policy. And they have a great amount of convergence of interests with India. And they are realistic and pragmatic. They are the one nation in Europe that has more or less refrained from pointing fingers at India and lecturing India about various things that the US and Germany, etc., lecture India about. And another nation in Europe that is these days becoming more aligned with India is Italy. Madame Meloni is the leader who is spearheading that. So it's great that Mr. Macron has accepted India's invitation, and he will grace India's Republic Day uh, celebrations. It's going to be something that further enhances India-France ties, the relationship. India will remember what the US has done, and India will remember that France stepped in and was willing to graciously step in and help India out. So these all these things are going to have long term consequences. Okay, long term means it's going to matter even 20 years down the line. One thing we know about India is that the Indian people are an extremely emotional people, and Indians don't forget. Indians forget many things, but certain things they don't forget, and this is one of the things that India will not forget. So here we are. So I think it's a great thing for the India France relationship. All right. Anurag says, who is next to Xi in China? Is there any chance that there are pro-Indian leaders in the CCP? Nope, 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 nope. There may be some certain moderate leaders, etc. Pro-India, everyone's pro-China in the CCP. Okay, you simply can't be. You have to. You have to prioritize your own nation's interest, and you will only be pro another nation if that is convergent with your nation's interest. That is the simple rule of real geopolitics. National interest first, nation first. uh, Now, who's next to Xi? We don't know. The Chinese system is so opaque, and Mr. Xi Jinping is so paranoid that nobody would dare to position himself or herself as number two. And there's no herself there because all the leaders in Xi Jinping's inner circle are men. So, yeah, it's dangerous for a leader to portray himself or herself as a number two to Xi Jinping. So we don't know who's next in China. Okay, as long as Xi Jinping holds on to power, there'll be no number two. And once, for whatever reason, he's no longer in power, whenever that happens, there could be a power struggle, and there could be some kind of chaos possibly in China for some time at least. So yeah, that's a deal, and I don't think there are any pro-India leaders in the Chinese Communist Party. That's where we are. Okay. Let us see other questions. This is by Apma. Early Christian era killing lots of women and millions. What might take? Well, yeah, that's recorded history. That's history that's not really emphasized in the West. They don't like to emphasize that, but it's true. Look, 1500 years ago, the culture in Europe was a local manifestation of the culture in India. You had the same gods, you had the same polytheistic culture with different names. So in various parts of Europe, we had different manifestations, different local manifestations of this ancient Indo-European polytheistic culture. Let's go back to the map. Where's the map? Here's the map. Let's go. So here's the map. Now look here. Yeah. So in the Slavic regions, you had a different set of divinities. In Greece, you had a different set of divinities, which includes Anatolia today, Turkey. In Italy, you had a different set of divinities. In France, the Gallic area. In present-day Spain, and in the British Isles and the Nordic regions, you had a different set of gods, but these were all the same gods, different manifestations of the same divinities. For example, we have the god Indra in India, which is who is the, let's say, the head or the chief of the Rigvedic pantheon of gods. Indra is known to have two weapons: the Vajra, which is the thunderbolt, and the hammer, which is also called the Vajra, right? And the god Zeus in Greece has the same attributes. The god Jupiter in Rome had the same attributes. The god Thor in Scandinavia had the same attributes. The god Perun in the Slavic parts of the world had the same attributes. So it's all the same thing, right? So Christianity was imposed upon Europe by force. Let's understand this very clearly. It was not something that was accepted by the Europeans willingly. It was imposed by force, and the original culture was smashed out of Europe forcefully. Okay, there were the Northern Crusades and whatnot. And read what's the name of the book? The Darkening Age. You go to Greece today. You go to Greece today, or go to Rome, and you will see that all the old temples of the old gods, of the True gods are smashed. If you look at the statues, the idols of those gods, Apollo, Nike, Artemis, whatever, these are all smashed. The noses are broken, the arms and legs and other body parts have been smashed out, right? So this was a violent process. Okay, and then we know very clearly, in India at least, that women have a very exalted role in Indian society. At least historically, it's been that way. The past 1,000 years, the taint of foreign culture came into India, and women had to hide in their houses and hide under the wheel. Uh, the wheel, Veil, wheel. Okay, let's not go into that. So before 1000 AD, the status of society, women in society in India was totally different from what it is today. Women had very prominent roles in society. They were respected probably more than most men. So that's the deal. And you had the same in Europe. Okay, you had the same in Europe before Christianity came in. And women were the healers. Women were the doctors. Women were they played very important roles in society. So all this ancient knowledge of herbal healing and whatnot, which we call Ayurveda here, and which may have had its counterparts in Europe, all of that was the domain of women. Okay, and that was a very important role that women played in society. And to smash the old culture out, the status of women had to be degraded. So any woman who had this ancient knowledge was then termed as a witch. Okay, you have any ancient knowledge, any knowledge that a man would not have, then you're going to be branded as a witch. You're going to be burned at the stake. And this happened over centuries. There was this big witch burning spate in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages in Europe a few centuries ago. Like, I don't remember exactly when. The second most popular book at one point in time in Europe was the Maleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of the Witches, which was a manual on how to identify witches and how to destroy them, how to kill them, how to torture them to extract confessions, and so on. The second most popular book in Europe was written by two Christian priests, Maleus Maleficarum. Okay, and so there was this reign of terror. So many women and some men also were accused of being witches and burned alive. And this persecution went on for centuries to enforce obedience, blind obedience, and fear in society. This is an entire culture based on fear. The Europeans don't, they have lost their original culture. They have lost their original culture. It's been smashed out of them by force, and they don't even know about this. I say this on occasion, right? That India is a society that suffers from PTSD as well as amnesia. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, Europe also has gone through that, and they have no recollection, excuse me, of their pre-Christian culture. There are some movements here and there to revive that. Um, I forget the Asatru is that religion in Scandinavia that they're trying to revive, which you know harkens back to the old polytheistic religion. And there is a Slavic revivalism as well, paganism, a little bit of that here and there. People are trying. And if you go to Lithuania, Latvia, etc., there is some Slavic revival there, and they don't have priests to officiate the traditions because the rituals. So they often invite Indian Vedic priests to do that for them. Well, what does it tell you? It's the same culture. It used to be the same culture. So to destroy this culture, they they brutalized the society in Europe. They destroyed all the temples. They destroyed the great tree Yggdrasil in Scandinavia, the tree of life, and so on. So it was a brutal, violent process. And like you say, millions of women were murdered just for having ancient knowledge. There we go. Okay. Okay, let's take some more questions. Dada says, will the woke culture get into India like the US and destroy Indian families by increasing single mothers and other forms of non-marital relationships between couples, also LGBTQIA plus zeroism, whatever that is? It's a big threat. It's a big threat. Woke culture. Okay. I believe in diversity. But what form of diversity do I believe in? I think the world is a beautiful place because of diversity. You travel to different parts of the world. You every new place you go to, you encounter a new culture, a new way of life, a different culture, a different way of life, and different traditions and different people. And that's what makes the world beautiful, the diversity. I go to Vietnam, this beautiful local culture, local cuisine, local traditions, wonderful to see. I go to Indonesia, a whole different set of traditions, culture, way of life. I go to uh, China, various parts of China, it's different. I go to Japan, they have their own beautiful way of preserving their ancient culture. I, I, I let's say I go to various parts of Africa. I go to various parts of Europe. Europe is a kind of a monoculture, unfortunately, because of what we just went into. But you go to different parts of the world, you find different cultures, different traditions, different ways of life. That's what makes the world beautiful, the diversity. Now, when you try to force fit all this diversity into one place where that doesn't belong, that's when you're going to have trouble. That actually creates monocultures by force fitting diversity into a small country or wherever. And that's what the West is trying to do. They call it diversity, but they're trying to actually impose a monoculture. Okay. And one of the best ways to do it is to destroy the fabric of society by destroying whatever people believe in. By So that's what's happening in the US, in the West. Most people are rejecting Christianity and they're becoming atheists. And once you give up your ancient traditions, even though it was an imposed tradition, okay, the old actual culture of Europe, like I said, is the old Indo-European culture, which was smashed out of existence. But whatever moral framework they've had for the past 1,000 years, the Europeans, is the moral framework of Christianity. It is better to have any moral culture than to have a moral set of guidelines than to have no moral guidelines at all. So today, because of people rejecting Christianity for a variety of good reasons, I would say, assume. So because they've rejected that, they have no set of moral guidelines anymore to live by. And then it's easy to infect them with this woke uh, mind virus, like Professor Gadsad would say, the mind virus, the woke mind virus. So, and if you look at US society today, I mean, single parents are the norm. Most kids grow up in the care or so-called care of their mothers who are single mothers. Most kids don't have a father figure in their life. And you know lots of studies have shown that if a kid grows up in a single parent family, but that parent is a father, that kid has a very low, I mean, much lesser chance of becoming a delinquent, of going to jail and being a criminal. But if that same kid grows up in a single parent family that has a mother instead of father, there's a very high chance of that kid going down the wrong path in life. That's just facts. Okay, many studies have shown this. So in the US, most kids are raised by mothers. And you see what's going on in the US. Crime is rampant, homelessness is rampant, drug use. Everyone does drugs. Everybody does drugs in the US. It's US culture now. It's American culture. And now I don't know. Gen Z is the kids born after a certain whatever year. I don't know, 2019, whatever it is. I think 30 or 40% of Gen Z identify as LGBTQ plus, whatever the spectrum thing is, right? I mean, what? And now they're trying to export that nonsense, all of that assorted nonsense, the whole package, to other countries. And the great uh, advantage the US has is that they control entertainment. Okay, everyone watches Hollywood, everyone watches US cinema, US series, those OTT series, whatever you want to call it. And and it's full of that. What's that new Game of Thrones thing, the Rings of Power or whatever? It was, I mean, I have not watched a single episode, but I've read the reviews. Everyone complains of the same thing. They have totally destroyed the story and they've tried to wokify everything and make everything diverse. So entertainment today in the US is about lecturing the audience instead of entertaining them. Entertainment used to be about escapism. That okay, I'm gonna watch this movie. Maybe it's a 2-hour movie. For 2 hours, I'll forget my life and I'm going to escape into a different world, a different universe. And today, if you watch any movie, you're not able to escape anything because they're going to lecture you. They're going to lecture you about the woke agenda, the message that they have to impart. So that's what Disney is doing. That's what everyone is doing. So, and Indian kids, they watch all this crap. They watch all this stuff. Okay, and that's coming into the mind space of Indian kids today. Look at Indian teenagers. They are also doing all kinds of nonsense, like uh, premarital relationships, like have 15 different partners in 5 years, that sort of thing, and all that. So that mind virus is already coming into India. Okay, and if it succeeds in taking root in India, it's going to destroy Indian society. It's going to destroy Indian society, and it's going to be terrible. Okay, so yeah, it's something we as a society have to be very. We first of all have to be cognizant of the threat this poses. We have to be aware. We have to accept the fact that it has already appeared in India, this problem, and we have to take the right steps to combat this, because this is something that is aimed at destroying Indian society and destroying Indian culture. This is something that's an outgrowth of the Marxist, neo-Marxist ideology of Derrida and Foucault, the French so-called alleged philosophers, who then became very influential in the West, and that's what the American academics, uh, that took it forth from the 1950s, 60s onwards, and now that's all that's taught in the U.S. universities and all. So yeah, I think it's a huge threat, and India needs to be cognizant of this, and India needs to take measures against this. All right, let's see something else. Yours Kabi says, what's your perspective about being an atheist and being a rationalist, and the difference between these two terms? I don't know what's it. Okay, an atheist is a person who doesn't believe in God. Okay, no God. A rationalist is also most likely an atheist, and rationalists, they think about everything logically. Um, so what's a rationalist? Somebody who views the entire world from the perspective of facts and logic and scientific explanations. So that's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. That's a good way of looking at the world. Look, why do things happen? They happen because of the laws of nature and because of human psychology. When things happen in nature, it's because of the laws of physics, and the laws of chemistry and biology are also consequences of the laws of physics. Okay, so if something happens in nature, it's because of the laws of physics and not because of anything else, as far as we know. That's the best evidence that we have. And when something happens in society, it's because of the forces that shape human history, geopolitics, power, human psychology, and so on. So you have to look at things rationally, nothing wrong with that. Now, the problem with certain so-called rationalists is that they make fun of people who believe in God and people who are spiritual or religious and all that. I mean, be it's perfectly good to be an atheist. It's your choice. Don't believe. It's perfectly good. It's actually great to be a rationalist. Look at everything rationally and logically. But today, the people who identify as rationalists are the ones who will denigrate certain cultures and not other cultures, and they will, do a token criticism of certain cultures once or twice, and then they will use that as the as the basis to the claim that they criticize everybody equally. Uh, so, from the proper definition of the term, a rationalist is a person who looks at the world through logic and through the laws of science, if they know science. I'm not sure if all rationalists know science, but they talk about science for sure. So I am also a rationalist, for sure. I look at the world from the perspective of logic, cause and effect. Okay, causality. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that I have to also be an atheist, right? The world is complicated. It doesn't mean that I have to be an atheist to be a rationalist. Uh, Look, we understand next to nothing about the universe. We are able to see, observe less than 5% of the universe. Less than 5% of it. Everything we see in the universe, whatever is visible to us, whatever is measurable, is less than 5% of what's out there in the universe. 95% of the universe is dark. It's invisible to us. And that 5% that we see, we don't even understand that properly. We don't even understand that properly. So our understanding of the laws of nature is minimal, to say the least. and to use that as the basis of your entire understanding of the world, and to criticize others who may have a different path or different viewpoint perspective. I think it's a little bit too much, I would say. Okay, so that's how I see the world. The thing is this. So I this is not I'm not this is not an observation about all so-called rationalists. I don't really know many of them, but see, truth is that the less you know, the more certain you are about your convictions and beliefs. The less you know, the more you think you know everything. And the more you know, the more you realize that we actually know nothing about the world, next to nothing about the world. So that's my perspective. Okay, I do see the world rationally. From that perspective, I'm a rationalist, but I don't have to be an atheist to be a rationalist. And yeah, that's all I'll say. Okay. Kid Rhymes says, I've seen a podcast on Mr. Gandhi. I'm assuming it's Mr. Mohandas Gandhi. Okay. If these things are factual, then why don't people or the elite class of our country accept it? Look, whatever I say, you can fact check it. If these things are factual, what kind of statement is that? Why don't you go ahead and fact check it? All the information is available in the public domain, sir. You can, without being a historian, without being a scientist or whatever, you can fact check everything I say. All the information is available in the public domain. Just do, you know how to do a Google search, go and fact check it. And then if I am wrong, you show the proof. Very simple. So these things, whatever I've said, are factual. They are based in nothing but facts, reality, historical records. Okay. So why don't most of the people in our country accept it? It's because of the education system. The education system in India teaches people to memorize what is written in the so-called textbooks. It teaches people to obediently accept what authority figures tell them. And the education system fails to teach the kids rational thinking, critical thinking. Critical thinking is something the education system doesn't teach our people. So our people don't know how to think. They don't know how to fact check. So then they simply hero worship because you have been taught to obediently obey everything your teacher says for 15, 20 years. So it just becomes ingrained in you. You can become conditioned like sheep. So our education system produces generation after generation after generation of sheep, obedient sheep who will simply obey. Okay. So whatever so-called great historian or so-called great writer says, we're gonna believe it. Oh yes, he said this, so it must be true. Oh, everyone says so and so historical figure is a god, so we're gonna worship that person. That's what it is. People simply don't think. People simply don't cross-check what's written in the textbooks, and people are taught that whatever is in the textbooks is infallible. That is it. You don't need to know anything beyond that. That's another thing the education system does. It says all you have to study is what's written in the textbook. You don't look beyond the textbook. That's all. You don't do any extracurricular reading. You don't read other books. We're gonna overburden you so much with our textbooks, with our homework, that you simply don't have the mental capacity, the mental bandwidth to read anything extra. And so you will see no other perspective. So that's why most people in our country, they simply blindly, like sheep, accept the official narrative. And when it comes to the elite class, well, that's a whole different story. Let me not go into that. I think you can think. All right. Let us see. Abhijit Chavda says, should research institutes like the Indian Institute of Science be taken out of the Ministry of Education in favor of Department of Science and Technology or something alike? Look, I would say that certain research institutes especially should be given full autonomy. Look, and you know, I have two podcasts with Professor Gautam Desiraju. He is a very senior scientist, chemist, India's foremost chemist, and he works at the Indian Institute of Science. And I have one podcast in which we actually walk around the institute, and we But he explains the history and all that about the institute. Very interesting podcast. I would recommend you watch it. Uh, and he did allude on camera and maybe at some other time also at the fact that the non-academic people, the bureaucrats who run the institute, they are a little bit too controlling, and they and this is something that is not limited to the IISc. It happens across the board. So typically in the Indian education system, in all institutions, including higher education, uh, the budget and all decisions are controlled by non-academic people, that is bureaucrats, career bureaucrats, who don't really even understand education. Actually, some of them may, a few may. I'm not saying all are bad, but most of them are simply disinterested and they just want to control things because it gives them the sense of power. Most of them, not all of them, right? So look at something like Princeton, where the institute of whatever it was at Princeton, where Einstein, Oppenheimer, and all, they spent a significant portion of their careers. That's a place where you can do whatever you want. Obviously, you have to be worthy of being accepted into the institute. Obviously, only the best of the best were accepted in Princeton, but then they could do whatever they wanted. And sometimes it works to the benefit of science. Sometimes it kind of takes away the urgency from scientists. So I think there should be some kind of balance system, and too much bureaucracy and too much political, etc. Uh, Paternalism is actually bad for research. Uh, One of the best models for doing research that has a tangible impact on the world is the US institution called DARPA, which was founded in the same year that DRDO in India was founded. And look at the divergent trajectory that both institutions have taken. DARPA produces such incredible technology, okay, or much of it is classified. And what they do is that they hire scientists, they identify scientists in the US academic system, in the US universities, etc., who are working on interesting and useful technologies. And they give them grant, like proper funding, not like peanuts funding here and there, proper mega funding. And they give them 2 years, or let's say 2 years. Okay, they give them a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's two, maybe sometimes it's three. Let's say it's 2 years. They give them this X amount of money. They give them a time frame. You have 2 years in which to take this money, utilize it to bring your research to a fruitful completion. And if it doesn't work, no issues. That's a risk we are willing to take. So it's not like if the result, if the research isn't completed, then there's going to be a black mark against the scientist. No, in science, certain things don't work out. And that's what you have to also understand. So DARPA has a great model. It has what? How many employees? 150 employees. That's it. It's a flat thing, and lots of scientists work under DARPA, but they work independently. Okay, their lives are not controlled by the bureaucrats in DARPA. DARPA doesn't have bureaucrats. So that's how it is. So that's a great model. I think the model of that we use in India is this ancient, archaic 19th century British colonial education system model that is applied everywhere, including to the best institutes. IISc is actually one of the best institutes in India, the best scientific institute for scientific research in India. Uh, so yeah, that's the thing. It would be great if we can give more autonomy to institutes like IISc, and it would be great if we could create something like DARPA as well. But DARPA, in India, DARPA would need to be able to fund scientists who are doing great work in India. And the problem in India is that in most of the universities, there's no real research that's happening. The scientists are only so-called scientists. You're not a scientist unless you're doing some active research and trying to solve a problem that hasn't been solved before. That's research, not recycling the same old nuclear configuration. I took this nucleus and I deformed it to this extent, and now I have some new characteristics that I'll publish a paper on. What a waste of time. Okay, most of India's nuclear scientists, that's what they do. So that's the problem in India. Once you have a job in the Indian academic system, it's a job for life, and then you just pretend to do something. That's what most of them do, not all. There are some genuinely great scientists, bright young scientists as well in India, no doubt about it. Okay, across the Indian academic system, maybe in various universities, maybe in the IITs, definitely at the IISc, but most of them I would say are mediocre and good for nothing. Facts are facts. So yeah, this all needs to be reformed. We, there is this crying need for reform, but yeah, nothing is happening thus far. All right. Okay, today we have a lot of questions about education. Saksham Chaudhary says, what should be the ideal education system? And how should the Indian government implement it without having any propaganda by opposition or other intellectuals? First of all, the education system has to be about merit, only merit, not reservations. And if you're going to do reservations, you should do reservations not based on your so-called caste, but it should be based on your financial status. Kids from poor families should be given financial, uh, financial support, and that's all. But once someone is given financial support, then they have the money, and then their academic performance should be the only yardstick by which you progress in the academic system and in life. So reservations are a huge problem that's destroying the Indian education system. First of all, because if there's a kid who is part of the so-called, what's it called, general category, then they have to get way higher marks than a kid in various reserve categories to get a seat in various institutions, IITs, IIMs, or whatever it is, NITs and universities. It's horrible. That's why everyone wants to leave this country, because they feel that this country doesn't value them. They feel that this country gives them a raw deal. It's not the Indian society that's doing this. It's the Indian system that's doing it. And the society is laboring under the system. And right now, because of various political reasons, it may not be possible to abolish this thing called reservations. So that's where we are, right? So number one, you need merit in the education system. And then the education system should not go on for 20 years, 25 years. I think most people don't want a master's degree. They simply want to start working at the earliest. They find something interesting. Some people like cars and find cars interesting, so they want to learn how to make cars or repair cars or modify cars or whatever. Some people like computers. Some people like building big structures like bridges and roads. Everybody wants to create something, to contribute something to society. You don't need to wait till 25 to do that. Most of us want to start working at a young age. Why can't we have a system in which you are taught the basic stuff of life, like basic history, communication in your native language, and mathematics, which is important, arithmetic, not algebra, trigonometry. You don't use that in real life. So teach the basic fundamentals by the age of 13, 14, and by 15 you can send the kid as an apprentice with a salary, with certain conditions. And it's only a few people who need master's degrees and all that. So the entire system is geared towards the wrong things, and they understand that the purpose of the education system is to create bright, young, confident, and capable and highly skilled young citizens who can go out into the world with confidence and contribute positively to society. That's what's needed. The education system does the exact opposite. It creates these confused, non-confident young adults who don't know what to do in life. They are sheep. They don't know how to think. They don't have the ability to do critical thinking. That's what the education system does. And a country which has that sort of a horrific education system actually is doomed. So that's where we are today. And it's going to be difficult for the Indian government to change this entrenched system, because there are so many vested interests. It's going to be really hard to do that, but it has to be done. So you're going to need supreme leadership to be able to do this. Let's see how it goes. Right now, we have some reforms that are being done, apparently, NEP and all that. Doesn't inspire any confidence in me, at least. All right. Education, we have spoken about that. Okay, this is a question I get every time, like 15 times a day in the comments and all that. Is India planning to take back POK and COK, Chinese occupied Kashmir? Do you think it's ever possible? It's possible, it will happen, but we're going to have to be patient. POK, see, Pakistan, like I always say, is a temporary nation. It's going to disintegrate when the time is right. It's going to disintegrate by itself. The best way to win a war is without having to fire a single shot. You achieve all your objectives without having to fire a single shot and without losing a single man. That's the best way to win a war. Wait patiently and create the right conditions for that temporary nation to disintegrate on its own. There are a lot of internal forces within Pakistan that will make it disintegrate when the time is right. Maybe 5 years, maybe 2 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. I don't see Pakistan existing more than 20 years down the line, as the way it is right now. And when it disintegrates, POK obviously will reintegrate with India. What about COK? It will take longer, perhaps. Okay, but you never know. So it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, but we need to be patient. You don't want to start a kinetic war. You don't want to, unless you know that victory is inevitable. And even if victory is inevitable, do you want to suffer so and so amount of damage in the process of victory? Why not achieve victory without suffering any damage at all? So wait, be patient. India is growing, India is rising. If we play our cards right, and if we ensure that we are not embroiled in any major military conflict for the next 20 years, India is going to surpass the China by the end of the century. India may even surpass the US by the end of the century. But it's a long-term game. Understand that we are not a nation that was born yesterday. Okay, the nation was born in 1947. It was created in this form as a nation state in 1947. But we are the world's oldest civilization. And for us, 100 years is nothing. It's like yesterday. 1,000 years is for us is day before yesterday. So we have to think from that perspective, and we have to all contribute in our own way towards doing that. So POK, COK, all that will come back in due time. Right now, let's focus on making India more powerful and stronger. The economy, the infrastructure, the education system, entrepreneurship, military, and so on. Let us all contribute in our own way, and that will set the process in motion. It's already in motion, which will eventually bring all these lost territories back to India. All right. See, we have lost a lot of territory. I've got the map over here. I'm looking there. Let me put it on the screen. We know what territories we have lost. Historically, what used to be India? I mean, Bharat, right? Bharat was this entire region from the Himalayas to the oceans. And in 1935, the Burmese had voted to not partition themselves from India. The Burmese wanted to remain a part of India. They had voted in favor of remaining part of India, and yet it was partitioned. So the British have broken India into pieces. So when Chinggis Khan in the year 1299, after his conquest of Khwarazm, when he came to India chasing Jalaluddin the Coward, what was the border between India and Central Asia? It was a pass in Tajikistan. So the border of Tajikistan was the border between Central Asia and India. In 1299, when Chinggis Khan came pursuing Jalaluddin the Coward, and he obviously eventually defeated Jalaluddin in the Battle of the Indus in Punjab, and then he returned back to Mongolia without ever setting foot, crossing the river, the Great River. So we have lost a lot. It's going to take time to recover our ancestral territories. Maybe it may not happen, all of it may not happen in our lifetime. So what? Our descendants will regain that. And that's what we have to work towards. So it's a long-term process. It's not going to happen all of it may not happen in our lifetimes. Maybe it will, but let's see. All right. Okay. Saint Crocodile says, Pranam, when China attacks Taiwan and if the US defends Taiwan militarily, what response should Bharat have if the US doesn't defend Taiwan? What it may end up doing? Look, we don't know when or if China will march upon Taiwan militarily. I mean, a military invasion. They have been wargaming various scenarios. We know where Taiwan is, I hope. Yes, here's the island of Taiwan. This one here. And you can see, I'm sorry, the map isn't on the screen. Here's the map. Okay. So we know where India is. So let's orient ourselves, go eastwards. And here we have Taiwan. Okay, over here. So the Chinese have been wargaming various scenarios by which they can invade Taiwan and recapture Taiwan. They consider Taiwan to be a renegade province. Taiwan is a heavily defended fortress of an island, and it is an ally of the US. Obviously, the US has a vested interest in not allowing Taiwan to go into Chinese hands. So let's consider this hypothetical scenario that in year so and so, maybe sometime in the future, near future, let's imagine hypothetically, that the Chinese invade Taiwan. Okay, then it's going to be a big hot war. Taiwan is not easy to conquer. Taiwan has tremendous defenses. They are supplied by the US. They have the latest weapons and all that. And the Americans will do their best to not allow China to take Taiwan without heavy damage. Okay. But let's say that the Americans fail and the Chinese take Taiwan. Okay. So the scenario is that China invades Taiwan. So what should India do in that situation? Well, I would say that India should make sure that we secure the Maldives and Sri Lanka. I'm saying secure, not invade. I'm not suggesting that we should invade and conquer Maldives and Sri Lanka. I'm saying we should secure Maldives and Sri Lanka and possibly Nepal as well. It will depend on the strength of the Indian armed forces, the Indian military strength at that time, whenever this hypothetical invasion happens, and so on, right? So yeah, so if the Chinese take such a step, then India should also take certain steps to safeguard its uh, national and civilizational interests. That's what I would say, but it will all depend on a variety of factors, including the strength of the Indian military and so on and so forth. Tejas says, why were they unable to loot and plunder India like the British? The British made India poor in just 150 years, but the Islamic invaders couldn't do the same thing in 1000 years. Look, the Islamic invaders, the Turks, did not rule India for 1000 years. First of all, let's understand that. Okay, the process of invasion starts around 700 something AD with the invasion of bin Qasim, Muhammad bin Qasim in Sindh, sometime in the 8th century, which was a temporary affair. Okay, and then the Turkic invasions start maybe 2 centuries later. So the process begins in the 8th century, and they tried and they tried and they tried to invade India. They first took Afghanistan. As Afghanistan was the first Kashmir. Okay, Afghanistan is the original Kashmir. Today, you don't have a single Hindu or Buddhist there. It was a completely Hindu-Buddhist territory of India, Gandhar. So this process begins about 1,000 years ago, and it took them 300-400 years to finally establish a so-called empire in New Delhi. And so you had the Delhi Sultanate, which ruled certain parts of northern India for some time. Then you had the so-called Mughal Empire, which was the Turkic Empire, which was established in the 15th, 16th century. Okay, look up history. I don't remember dates. I never remember dates because it keeps my mind free for other things, for thinking. So you can look up the dates. And then the Mughal Empire fell in the 1700s. So they were in power for what, 200, 250 years? That's it. Okay. And then you had various sultanates in the southern part of India, and you had Bengal, which was ruined. And today we have Bangladesh and so on. So they did not rule India for 1,000 years, first of all. And when the Mughal Empire, the so-called Mughal Empire, was at its peak, they used to send tremendous amounts of Indian wealth to Mecca, Medina, and to Central Asia. And the number of Indian people they enslaved and sent to the slave bazaars of Central Asia is beyond number, is uncountable. There are so many people in Central Asia and in the Arabic world who look very Indian. Why is that, you ask me? Because their matrilineal lineages will be Indian. Okay, and I'm sure you can imagine how that happened. Uh, so they did a lot of damage to India, the so-called Mughals, the Turks. And if you look at the Indian GDP, okay, I don't have the graph right now with me, the Angus Madison graph of the past 2,000 years. So the decline in the Indian GDP begins when the so-called Mughals had started ruling India and they had captured large parts of Indian territory, all right? And there's a significant drop in Indian population as well. So they did a lot of damage to India, but the British, they elevated this to the next level. They did, I don't know, hundreds of artificial famines in India in 150, 200 years. Okay. They devastated India because if you are starving, how will you fight? So they killed off, I would say, between 100 to 200 million Indians through artificial famines. And they took plunder and theft to the next level. Nobody can match the Anglos in thievery, in theft. Okay, the biggest nation of thieves ever is true. So they took it to the next level. The Anglos, the British. So clearly they were better than the Turks in stealing and thievery and in genocide as well. So yeah, they had a very systematic way of extracting all the wealth and resources and everything out of India. They built railways for that. They built ports for that. All the railways, all the ports, all the institutions they built were part of the infrastructure of extraction. It's not some gift they gave to India. It was their infrastructure they built for extracting everything of value out of India. And when they finally left India, they did of their own volition, not because somebody forced them through non-violent means. They left because there was nothing else left to plunder from India. Everything of value had been sucked out of India by that time. So all the wealth that India built up over thousands of years, it's all in the West today. All of it. And the West, the Western way of life and whatever wealth they enjoy, it's been redistributed through complex methods across the West. So yeah, there you go. All right. Okay. Again, education. Why does the government spend only 0.66% of GDP on R&D and 2 to 3% on education? Will it increase in the future? Why doesn't the Indian government promote R&D? Well, that's a question for the Indian government to answer. Okay, I do not know. We definitely look, the education system is the key to the future of the nation, of the civilization. So it really, really, really needs to be reformed. But maybe right now it's too much. I don't know what the reason is. Maybe it's too difficult a task right now. Maybe it's politically too inconvenient. Maybe it's politically too you're gonna come up with a huge amount of opposition. Look, the government does anything good to benefit the nation, there's a huge amount of opposition to India, to the move. You have the farm laws, and then there were these horrible protests against the farm laws, and the prime minister took those laws back. Okay, even though there was no need for that, but probably he did the right thing at the time, because all of these, much of these protests and all that resistance is organized and fomented from outside of India. Okay. Now, if let's say the government goes ahead and does some genuine educational reforms, something as simple as detoxifying the Indian textbooks, history textbooks, you do that, the whole leftist ecosystem will be up in arms. The entire anti-national ecosystem will be up in arms, and you're going to have a spate of articles and op-eds published in the West accusing India, the government of India, of being fascist and trying to saffronize things and trying to, further hatred or whatever they allege. Okay, and that's maybe a problem they don't want to take on right now. Maybe I'm just assuming, right? So but R&D, well, to have good R&D, you need good quality researchers. We have some very bright young people in this country, and we have some bright senior scientists as well. But I would say that the vast majority of the Indian academics are mediocre, and they are good for nothing. The vast majority. There are lots of exceptions. There are some really bright people as well, really good people, really talented, dedicated people as well. But the vast majority are mediocre. Go to any Indian university and see just ask yourself, how do I feel in this environment? Yeah. So if you increase the R&D percentage of GDP or the education percentage of GDP, it's gonna get wasted at this point in time. The first step is to reform the system, and then you increase the funding. That's what needs to happen. You have a rotten system, and if you fund it more, it's going to get even more rotten. That is the problem. That is the problem. So R&D, I mean, tell me which Indian university. Let's talk about physics and engineering and technology. In which Indian university is some great research happening? Okay, IISc, there is some good research happening there, Indian Institute of Science. Apart from the Indian Institute of Science, tell me one Indian university or IIT where some new groundbreaking research has been done in the past 20 years. Please name one. No one's doing anything. So what's the point of funding them? You first need to reform the system, get rid of the non-performers, bring in bright new young talent, and then fund them. That's the process. That's the chronological step-by-step way in which this must be done, and that's why we have this. Otherwise, it's going to be completely wastage of money, total wastage of money. All right. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. Let's see what else. FFF says, why has the US forced its European vassals to accept millions of refugees from North Africa and the Middle East and destroyed their demography, but not its other vassals like Japan and South Korea? There is some demographic change happening in Japan as well, by the way. Okay, they are being made to accept certain flavors of immigrants right now, without naming anything. South Korea, South Korea has lost its culture. The majority of South Koreans are either atheists or Christians. Where's the South Korean culture left in South Korea? Deracinated, rootless youngsters in South Korea. That's what you have. And North Korea is a communist, atheist nation. So Korea has been destroyed, culturally. Culture is gone. How many practicing Buddhists do you still have in Korea, in South Korea? So that's what's been done to Korea. So once you erase a nation's culture, you can control it in any way you want, especially when you bring in your culture, bring in this Western culture, Western religions into the nation. That's how you can. You know what? One of the biggest national security threats is cultural and demographic change. So that's what they do. They engineer this. In Japan, maybe the process is beginning right now. When it comes to Europe, yeah, I mean, look at the videos that come up on social media. Recently in Spain, a whole army of young military age African males running across the border or whatever it was, and you know uh, infiltrating into Spain. It was a large number, maybe more than 1,000, of young military age males, African males. Why is this being done? You know the situation in France, you know the situation in Germany, you know the situation in the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, all that. uh, Italy, I mean, what is being done right now in front of our eyes is that these nations are being destroyed, and it's going to be impossible unless there is a. It's going to be almost impossible to deport all of these infiltrators, because they're going to be made to integrate in some way within society without actually assimilating. They're going to impose their culture. So that's what's being done. That's what's being done to the US vassals in Europe, like you say. You're correct. And the objective is to destroy European society. That's what it is. I mean, demographic change is a national security threat. It destroys nations, it destroys culture. Demographic change is a threat to any nation's sovereignty, to its culture, to its cultural continuity, and to its demographic continuity. Why should a nation not preserve its culture and its demography? Why not? Why this forced so-called diversity? If they want to do it in the US, do it. Why are you forcing it on other nations? Well, that's what they can do. I have always said this, that there are only two major powers in Europe. One is Russia, the other is the US. And every nation in Western Europe is dominated by the US. Okay? So that's what we are seeing, and what we know what's been happening in Germany and all. It's a disaster. So these nations are being made to essentially commit harakiri. That's what's being done. Bye Bye says Macron, Monsieur Emmanuel Macron of France, is very left. Yes, he's a leftist. Yes, and he also allows migration. So how can he be respected by Modi? Excuse me, what? I don't care what he does in his country. I only care whether his interests align with my interests. I will respect anybody whose interests align with mine, and who will work with me towards strengthening my nation while also strengthening his nation or his interests. I don't care what he does in his country. That's his problem. That's his business. I don't understand this perspective that he does this, he does that. I don't care what he does. As long as his interests align with mine and he works with me, which helps me, I'm gonna respect him. I'm gonna embrace him. I'm gonna hug him. I'm gonna cherish him. What kind of perspective is this? This is the emotional perspective of Indians. Indians are so incredibly emotional. They don't see the world through a realistic lens. I don't care what it does. Look at the Americans. They prop up these various dictators in Africa. What do the dictators do in Africa? Horrible things. The Americans don't care. That's how geopolitics works. It's called realpolitik. Have you ever heard of Vishnugupta Chanakya? This is the nation of Vishnugupta Chanakya, and we see such comments. I don't care what he does in France. He's good for India, so I'm going to respect him. Uh, it's not about respect, Baba. It is not about respect. It's about national interest. It's not about respect. It's about national interest. If someone's in national interest aligns with my national interest, he is good for me or she is good for me, and I'm going to work with them. What else does matter in the world? What else matters? France is all the way there. They have interest in the Indian Ocean region, which align with our interests, and they have another interest in, and they want to break free of the US in some shape or form eventually, sometime in the future. That also is good for us, and they're willing to sell good technology to India. It's a transactional thing, sell, buy and sell. Okay, but other nations won't even sell, so that's good for India. So how do I care whether he's left or right or green or pink or blue? I don't care whether he allows migration and is being forced by the US to destroy his country. I don't care. He's good for me. I can work with him. Look at the world from that perspective, from a realistic perspective, instead of looking at what religion they are, or what ideology they believe in or not believe in, or what they do in their country. Who cares? This is what I don't understand about Indians. That's what the education system has done to Indians. Indians don't are incapable of critical thinking, even though Indians are the most intelligent people in the world. So strange. That's what the education system has done to Indians. Think of the world from a realistic perspective and ask questions. Question all your assumptions, first of all. First of all, start questioning yourself. Start questioning your assumptions, then you'll be able to think. Uh, what about China's next probable nuclear test, says Kuldeep? No idea. Look, I have no idea what's happening in China. China is a black box, opaque. Okay, very little news comes out from China. It's very tightly controlled. So I don't know. We'll see if they do it. I can't speculate without any actual data. I don't have data, so I can't speculate. All right. A good question. Zed Zion says, why are the Scythians classified as Iranians instead of Indo-Aryans? Who does these classifications? Ask yourselves this question. Who does these classifications? Whose classifications are we currently accepting as the standard narrative? It's Western historians. Everything has been created by the West. All these narratives, all these so-called accepted mainstream narratives and all of that has been created by the West. So the Scythians are classified as Iranians. The Scythians, well, the best way to put it across is Indo-Iranians. But Iran itself was this tiny entity compared to India, geographically large, but population density-wise very sparse. The Persians themselves are an offshoot of Indians, okay, who went westwards from India and settled down. Let's put the map on the screen in case people don't know what Persia is. I'm sure some people don't, which I don't blame you for. Okay, so Persia is Iran, today's Iran, and historically Afghanistan, Pakistan was India, right? So India and Persia were neighboring, political entities. Iran was a daughter civilization of India. Iran, the modern name is Iran, which has existed for less than a century. The actual correct name is Persia. The people of Persia were the Parshva people, the Parshva clan of the Rigvedic Indians, okay? And they settled down they went westwards out of India, and they settled down in this region, and their capital was Parshvapur, which is now called Persepolis, because we have to use Greek names instead of indigenous names. So the Greeks called that city Persepolis. Today, the Persians call it Parsa. Historically, it was called Parshvapur. Is that not an Indian name? Parshvapur, the city of the Parshva people. So that's the deal. So even the Iranians are nothing today. Okay, today's Iranians are genetically somewhat different. Okay, because in the last 200-300 years, there's been a huge Turkic influx into Iran, and they brought in lots of immigrants from the Caucasus region. So today you will find lots of Iranians, not lots, but some Iranians who have blue eyes and blonde hair. Some of them may even have red hair. Some of them, a few of them. Okay, that's not the original Iranian look. The original Iranian appearance was light brown skin, brown eyes, and dark hair. That was what the original Iranian person looked like, right? Uh, so the Scythians were another branch of out of India migrants who ruled Central Asia for a couple of thousand years at least, and eventually they re-entered India as through an invasion about 2000 years ago. About 2000 years ago, and that invasion brought an end to the Indo-Greek rule in northwestern India, in Gandhar, and in Punjab. So the Scythians re-entered India as invaders. They were actually fleeing the Scythian. They were actually fleeing the Kushans, who were fleeing the Huns. Long domino effect over here. And then they established kingdoms in northern and western India. Some of the Mahakshatrapas ruled in Saurashtra, in Gujarat, and they were as Indian as anybody else, even though they had come from Central Asia, because their ancestry was Indian anyway. So they left India thousands of years ago. They ruled Central Asia for a long time, and then they re-entered India and re-assimilated into Indian society. And their culture was more or less the same as Indian culture. The Scythians were known to be sun worshippers. Saurashtra. What does it mean? The nation of the sun. Saurashtra, solar nation. Saurashtra, which is the peninsular region of Gujarat. So the Scythians were genetically more or less the same as Indians. And some genetic traits were picked up here and there, which is bound to happen when you are a nomadic confederation that rules a very large area. But more or less they were Indian. There was no cultural clash when the Scythians invaded and conquered parts of India and started ruling over India. The Mahakshatrapas in Western India, they were the protectors and servants of the great Jyotirlinga temple of Somnath, right? Until the 6th, 7th century AD. And then a different dynasty comes over. That's a different story. So this classification of Scythians as Iranians is a Western invention. Okay, they say that the Scythian language is an Iranian language. So that's simply a Western classification. We in India, we simply blindly copy what the West says, and this applies to Indian academics as well, who themselves are not capable of critical thinking. They'll simply copy what the West says, and that's why we are taught that the Scythians are Iranians. They're actually Indo-Iranians or Indo-Aryans, which is correct. Like X Zion says. Z Zion says right here. All right. Who else? What else? Girish says, what's the current status? Current status of the Russia-Ukraine war. What's the current status? The current status is that there's not much happening. It's what's called slow war. The past year, if you look at the lines on the map from between the territories are conquered by Russia and the territories still in Zelensky's so-called power, you don't see much movement. The boundaries are more or less static right now. There's some movement here and there, a little bit here and there. There's a lot of fighting happening. And now the Ukrainians are forced to enlist middle-aged men in their 40s and 50s, even 60s. That's the new crop of recruits into the Ukrainian armed forces. Even women are now being recruited, conscripted to fight in the war. Pregnant women. So that tells you everything you need to know. They have no youngsters left. The flower of Ukrainian society, the youngsters, are dead. Males, men, dead. This entire thing has been a giant meat grinder for Ukraine. It has destroyed Ukraine forever, essentially. No men left, no young men left. Even the old men are being sent to fight. The Russians are perfectly fine with that. They have made it a point not to destroy Ukraine cities. They have not done what the Americans would do in a war, flatten entire cities. They have not touched the cities. There's been some here and there, but overall, there are you will see so many videos on social media of Ukrainian women partying in Kiev and whatnot. Does it look like a nation at war? The Russians have made sure they don't do that. Okay, so that's the situation. The Ukrainian war is lost from the Western perspective. Okay, it's a proxy war between the West and Russia has succeeded, and they're going to be patient. They're going to wait another 2 years if they need to, but eventually they're going to get their way. I have said this since February 22. The invasion, the Russian special military operation ordered by Mr. Putin, began on February 22, 24 in the year 2022. And I said Russia will win. And for the longest time, people were saying Russia is losing. Russia has lost everything. Russia has lost all its men. Russia has lost all. There's no more weapons left. Excuse me. What's going on right now? Everyone who was saying that the West will win, that Ukraine will win, where are those people today? I have said this from the day one that Russia is going to win this war. And now, even the funding seems to have dried up. The Americans were sending, I don't know, tens of billions of dollars, on an ongoing basis to Ukraine. That has stopped now. It's over. When it is officially over, it remains to be seen. Maybe in 24, maybe in 25, maybe in 26. Putin is patient. He's going to get his way, and Ukraine is finished. This person Zelensky has destroyed Ukraine as a nation. Okay, Ukraina, the borderlands of Russia, the Slavic people. That's what the nation means. What the name Ukraine means. It means borderlands. Whose borderlands? Russia's borderlands. It will go back to Russia. Okay, and the western part of Ukraine will go back to Poland, Belarus, or whatever. We'll see about that. Slovakia, Hungary, maybe. That's what Putin is willing to do. But eventually, Putin will decide the fate of Ukraine. It's going to be most likely at some point in time in the future, maybe in the next 5 years, perhaps, most of Ukraine will be reintegrated into Russia. That's what's going to happen. I'm saying this today. Let's see if I'm right or wrong. Okay. Karthik says there are multiple terrorist attacks. How are we going to tackle this with reference to Parliament attack and the J&K attack on the Indian Army? Look, multiple fronts are being opened up against India in anticipation of the 2024 general elections. The objective is to create chaos in India and to make the current government look weak just before the elections. And who is doing all this? Okay, you think it's Pakistan who is doing this? You think it is some random group of primitive savages who occupy parts of Manipur who do this? Who is coordinating all this? Who is giving the leadership? You think a bunch of primitive tribals have the intellect and the leadership to carry out a sustained, coordinated campaign in Manipur? You think these terrorists are just randomly coming in through the LOC in Jammu and Kashmir? It is all being done in a coordinated fashion. Okay, and we can actually expect more of this. The Parliament attack also, whatever that was, yeah. So how are we going to tackle this? Right now, India has two choices. We wait for the election to get over. We play defense. We play defense for the next 6 months. And we may have to absorb and swallow some pain in the process. But, you always have to think about the long term. You don't think of the short term. Sometimes you have to absorb some pain in the short term. And I think some people will not like what I say, but that's simply the way the world works. You have to prioritize your long-term national interest. So I think that's what the government is doing right now. We will, for the time being, absorb. We'll play defense for now. We may absorb some pain. If the Pakistanis cross certain lines when it comes to these terrorist attacks, we may retaliate and disproportionately. But that remains to be seen, what lines the Pakistanis are willing to cross. So my point is, this is all being orchestrated not from India's neighborhood, but from far outside of India. from far away from India's neighborhood. Okay, there are certain powers that don't want India to rise. There are certain powers. Let me just say it aloud. The United States doesn't want a strong government to come to power in India in 2024. And I'm just saying that they uh, that you can expect more of this to happen before 2024. So right now there are a number of options for India. First of all, the simplest option is play defense, absorb some pain for some time. After the election is done and dusted, we will take certain steps. The hammer will fall on, yeah, you know who, east and west, both sides. The hammer will fall eventually. Where are you from? Why don't you accept super chats? I am from another planet, Epsilon Eridani. Why don't I accept super chats? Because I want to give everybody a level playing field. Long ago, when I started this show, the Ask Abhijit show, I had, for some time, for some episodes, I had accepted super chats, and then I realized that most of my viewers are students, and students are broke. I've been there. I've been a student. Students don't have money, and if I start accepting money to answer questions, it's kind of, yeah, I mean, it's not, that's not who I am, right? And I want everybody to be able to ask questions regardless of whether they have money or not. That's why I don't accept super chats. Kush Shah says, what's your opinion on Vivek Ramaswamy? Very interesting guy. uh, Republicans, typically Indians, American Indians are Democrats, blindly supporting the Democratic Party. But Vivek Ramaswamy is a Republican, so is Nikki Haley. Vivek Ramaswamy is a super smart guy who has the right answers for every question, who has the right arguments that can destroy any opponent. And very interestingly, he has consistently and repeatedly and always refused to criticize one person, Donald Trump. So I think Vivek Ramaswamy is playing a long term game. The actual target is 2028, the 2028 election. Right now, he will make a name for himself, and he is very impressive, and lots of people are slowly coming around to support him in the Republican Party. Republican voters, I mean, people, citizens who identify as Republicans, they are more and more coming around towards supporting him and having a very favorable opinion of him. He is taking a very principled stand. He's criticizing his own party candidates like Nikki Haley, especially, for being compromised and corrupt and all that. And he refuses to criticize Donald Trump. So the best possible result for Vivek Ramaswamy in the 2024 upcoming election is that Donald Trump accepts him as his vice presidential candidate. So for 2024, Vivek Ramaswamy is not targeting a presidential run. He is hoping to be Donald Trump's vice presidential partner. That's how I see it. And he has a bigger prize further down the line, the 2028 election, in which he would want to run for president, the top office. That's how I see it. Very smart guy, and very popular among the Republicans, among the Republican voters. Okay, where are we? What else do we have? We already answered the question about the woke culture. Um, Even Lord says, do you think the US will face martial law during the 2024 election cycle? Not sure about that. Martial law. I mean, US is anyway an autocratic nation. What did I just say? The US, an autocracy? Yes, it's an autocracy. Do you know how easily you can be shot in the US by cops? It's so easy to be shot by cops in the US. It's anyway a nation that's crawling with cops. You take the cops away from New York City for 15 minutes, you're going to have riots. Just 15 minutes, I promise you. New York City is crawling with cops everywhere. You take them away for 15 minutes, you're going to have riots. It's a nation that functions because of an overwhelming police presence. It's already a nation under martial law. And everybody has guns. What can I say? So, will there be violence in the 24 election cycle? I hope not. Of course, I hope not. But who knows? So, yeah, depends on what steps the two political parties take. Right. Hetal Kataria says, any recommendations for reading sources for a newbie interested in world history and geopolitics? Look, if you want to understand geopolitics, you have to understand history. There's no way out. There's no textbook of geopolitics. I have not read a single book whose title is Geopolitics. There are no books on geopolitics. I will write one. Okay, that's down the line. Uh, there are no books on geopolitics. So the only way to actually gain an understanding of geopolitics, which is how the world really works, the only way to do that is to study a lot of history, world history, local history, and so on and so forth. So there are no books on geopolitics. That's answer number one. Number two, to really gain some kind of understanding of geopolitics, study a lot of world history, lots and lots and lots of it, because that's how you start understanding the cause and effect chain, causality. Why do things happen? How do they happen? What's There's a lot of human psychology in there. So, what would I recommend for world history? I would recommend Will Durant. Will Durant. Let me put that out on the thing. Where is the thing? Will Durant. The Story of Civilization. I think it's called The Story of Civilization. Civilization. Let's create that, and let's put that there. See that thing. That's a multiple volume set of books, huge. It'll take you maybe a couple of years to read, but yeah, start there. It's not easy. You gotta do that. Anisha says, hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Um, what else? Tejas says, how is Antarctica there in P.D. Rice's map 1513? Did ancient people know more about the world than we think? Possible, possible. So I don't have the map with me right now, but yes, so there's a map from 1513, like Tejas says, uh, in case that year is correct. But yeah, there's an ancient map that shows Antarctica, or some kind of landmass where Antarctica actually exists. So what does it mean? Well, the simplest explanation is that somebody during those days, the 16th century, actually knew that there was this continent called Antarctica. And why is it so hard to believe? People travel. People want to explore new horizons. They want to go where nobody else has gone before. That's one of the driving forces of human nature. Not all of us has that. Not all of us have that. But some of us have that desire, that the driving force. That let me go and do something that nobody else has done. And such people risk a lot. So yeah, it's possible that somebody in Europe knew about this, and that's why it is there on the map. I mean, why else would a landmass be placed on a map exactly where Antarctica is? So it's possible. It's possible. Okay. Bai says, have you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra? Why don't we see any such animations on Indian history? The creators of the series nicely combine East and West concepts. I haven't seen The Last Airbender. I haven't seen The Legend of Korra. I don't have the time to watch. I mean, I love movies. I love TV series. As a kid, I used to watch a lot of cartoons, anime, whatever. Uh, but I haven't seen any of these. No time, unfortunately. But I know that they are really well done, very well designed, very well narrated, very interesting, engrossing stories. And they combine this East and West thing, mainly Japanese anime, with some blend of Japanese culture with Western elements and all that, concepts and all that. And the Japanese, they had that anime version of the Ramayana, beautifully made, better than anything Indians have made. So I don't know. So why do we not see such animations on Indian history? Because nobody is bothering to do it. It takes time and money to do it, and whoever has the time and the money isn't very fond of Indian culture. Look, who is creating content in India from an entertainment perspective? I'm not talking about people on YouTube. I'm talking about the actual industry. It's Bollywood, isn't it? And the various OTT platforms which put out various OTT series and all that. I don't watch any of those because the quality is mostly abysmal. Some of them may be good, but I don't bother. So look, you give me $10 million, okay? I'm gonna get it done. You need money to do that. You see, you need money to do it. So the money is in the wrong people's hands, and the people who are interested in this, they probably don't have the money, or they don't have the know-how and the wherewithal to do this. So I think as India becomes more prosperous, as in the Indian economy grows, you will see more of this coming out. I would love to see a 10 season, uh, a new animated version of the Mahabharata and also the Ramayana, 10 seasons, 10 episodes per season. How about that? It will be brilliant, animated. I mean, in animation, you can actually visualize the world as it used to be. If you are doing live action, you need to have costumes, you need to have props, you need to have locations. It's very hard to bring out the truth of the ancient reality of India. In animation, you can do it. So I think I would love to see a 10 season new animated version of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, 10 episodes per season, total 100 episodes. I would love to see that, because it's such a complex, rich, and detailed story, the Ramayana as well as the Mahabharata. I'm not saying story as in fiction, it's history. But it's something that's so complex, and it spans generations essentially, the entire uh, literature. So that would take time to do. I would love to see it. I would love to see it well done and well made and respectful of Indian culture. I mean, there are there was this movie recently. Uh, I forget the name of the movie in which was about the Ramayana. Uh, who's that guy who plays Ravan? Saif Ali Khan or whatever. I could not bring myself to go and watch the movie. Okay, so there are these atrocious takes on the Ramayana, the Mahabharata that Bollywood comes up with. So yeah, I would love to see it happen. Animated versions in the future. Okay. Suraj Kanta says, can NRC be the solution to the Manipur crisis? If not, what else can it be? Uh, Look, the money. Look, I I have an entire episode on Manipur. I also have a podcast with. Uh, I have a podcast on Manipur as well, in which I am not the main speaker, but I have an episode of Ask Abhijit about Manipur, a 2 hour episode. But let me answer the question. Look, first of all, we do understand to solve a problem. You have to first understand how you have to understand the nature of the problem. To understand the nature of the problem, you have to look into the history of the problem. How was this problem created? Manipur. Right now, what's the situation in Manipur? Do we know where Manipur is, my dear Indian friends? Okay, let's find Manipur. We know where India is. Go to the far east of India, which they call the northeast. And here we have the state of Manipur. It's a state today. It used to be a kingdom. It was a large kingdom. Parts of Tripura were part of it. Much of Nagaland was part of it. Various parts of present-day Burma were part of the kingdom of Manipur, the Kabo Valley, and further. At some point in time, a Manipuri king even conquered parts of Yunnan, present-day China. Okay, and Manipur has a very ancient history, at least 2,000 minimum, maybe 3,500, maybe more. And the Manipuri language has existed for 2,000 years at least. And which ethnic group is the originator of the Manipuri language? Is it the Nagas, the Meiteis, or the Kukis? It's the Meiteis. So the true Manipuris, the true natives, the true indigenous people of Manipur are the Meiteis and the Nagas. The Nagas are essentially the same people as the Meiteis, but they live in the hills. Long story. Now, when did these foreign infiltrators enter Manipur? The process began let's say in the middle of the 19th century. It all began with the root cause of the problem is bad succession. Once a king dies, who comes to power next? Bad succession. So Bhagyachandra, he was he elevated Manipuri culture to the high heavens. Okay, whatever you see of Manipuri culture today, whatever is left, is much of it is thanks to Bhagyachandra, the king Bhagyachandra. But when he died, there was infighting between his sons as to who becomes the king. So despite being a great patron of culture, Bhagyachandra messed up when it comes to succession, and that you cannot do. So because there was infighting between his sons, the Burmese were able to invade Manipur. Okay, And there was the 7 years of devastation. After that, Manipur again regained her freedom, but the kings were weak and the British were involved in the Treaty of Yandabo, and that's how the foreign interference in Manipur starts. When the British became the main power in Manipur, the kings became essentially feeble and weak, and that's how. And then the British started advising, let's say, the Manipuri king to bring in certain people from what is currently Burma. These are the so very small numbers of these people who are living in Burma were brought in, the so-called cookies. Okay, it's not one ethnic group; it's a multitude of various tribes. So the Thado cookies, whatever. Um, so the thing is this: that's when a very small number of these infiltrators were brought in by the British. The British forced the Manipuri king to do this. But even in 1900 to 1901, the percentage of these cookies was less than 1% in Manipur. Look at the British records, look it up. Then more infiltration happened, and the Meiteis fought a war against the British for independence in 1891. They lost, and as a result, the British punished them by confining all the Meiteis to the Imphal Valley region, which is less than 10% of the entire region of Manipur today, present day region of Manipur. And they settled in these cookies, these foreigners, into southern Manipur, etc., where they exterminated the local forest people, the hill people, the Nagas. All of that, where cookies live today, it was Naga territory. All the Nagas were expelled from there violently, murderously. So today the situation is that the border is open. Okay, it's long story short, and these people are just infiltrating through the border of Manipur and Burma, and also via Mizoram. It's a whole different story there. So the situation today is that half of Manipur is under foreign occupation, and these people are not even Burmese. They don't speak Burmese language, the Burmese language. They don't practice Burmese culture. They actually are from Yunnan in China. Okay, originally, go back like 3-4 centuries. That's the situation. So what is the solution? The solution is to expel all infiltrators out of India. First, do an NRC. The NRC date should be 1949. 1949 should be the NRC date. Anybody who who was not living in Manipur before 1945, or whose parents or grandparents were not living in Manipur before 1949, needs to go back to Burma, and then they're Burma's problem. You can't have I said earlier, demographic change is a national security threat. So that's what needs to happen, and there is complete lawlessness in more than half of Manipur right now. There have been horrific atrocities committed, and I assure you that the government of India is aware of who uh, the perpetrators are, who the culprits are. And this problem will take minimum 20 years to solve. We know who the culprits are, we know who the terrorists are, we know who the infiltrators are, and we know who the victims are. Okay, and the government also knows when the hammer falls, it will fall heavily. But the problem will take minimum 20 years to solve. And the problem between that the indigenous people of Manipur face, I'm talking about the Meiteis, zero leadership, zero cohesion. You need to solve your own problems first. Okay, you can't expect outsiders, I mean, outside of Manipur, to come and solve all your problems. The problem was created by your king, Bhagyachandra, because he did not choose the right successor. He did not make it clear to everybody that who his choice of successor was. That's every downfall of a kingdom or an empire is because of wrong succession. And that's where the problem began. So Manipur has been in decline for the past 220 years. It all began with the death of Bhagyachandra, and it's been a downhill slope ever since. And today, the people of Manipur, the natives of Manipur, the Meiteis, are confined to about 6 or 7% of the territory of Manipur, and more of their land is being taken over by foreigners. Minimum 20 years to solve the problem. NRC is a good step, but the cutoff date should be 1949. So that's what I can say about this in very brief. Long, big thing. But the indigenous people of Manipur are the Meiteis and the Nagas, nobody else. Okay. Keshav says, what can India do for protection at the Red Sea and Arabian Sea so that we can trade without any fear? And what do you think of Middle East trade corridor? Look, India needs to invest in a very powerful navy. We keep on saying we keep on saying that the Indian Ocean region is our strategic backyard. Yeah. Well, you don't own a backyard unless you have a constant presence there. The number one rule of territory is use it or lose it. Okay. The Chinese were able to take over Aksai by just walking into it and building a road. And India was not aware. If you're not using the territory, you're going to lose it. Similarly, in the Indian Ocean region, if we don't have a major naval presence there at all times, how can we say it's our strategic backyard? Words don't make it a strategic backyard. You've got to take action. So we need to invest in numbers of naval assets. Instead of investing in huge, gigantic aircraft carriers, we need to invest in smaller ships, large number of smaller ships that should be visible in the Indian Ocean region, in the Bay of Bengal, in the Sea of Saurashtra, in the Lakshadweep Sea, and south of that. Everywhere anyone comes, they should see an Indian naval presence everywhere. They should understand that now we have come into India's strategic backyard, and we see Indian naval assets everywhere. That can only happen if we invest in numbers, quantity of ships, quantity of naval assets. It doesn't have to be huge ships. It can be small ships, missile boats. Missile boats can be small, but they pack a deadly punch. You build a missile boat worth 20 or 30 million dollars, which is not a lot when it comes to ships, and you put 3 BrahMos missiles on that. It's a deadly asset to have, and give it an endurance of, let's say, 2,000 kilometers and 30 days or 60 days or whatever, and then see and build 200 of those. It's not a lot of money actually, for considering the big picture. So India needs submarines. So what India needs to do is that invest in large quantities of cheap but effective naval assets, quantity as well as quality. Some of these assets should be big, like large warships, destroyers, frigates, corvettes, all that, but also smaller vessels as well. Large numbers. So every time anyone enters this region, the so-called Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal, the Lakshadweep Sea, wherever, they should see the Indian naval presence at all times. It should be visible. It should be in your face. That's when you know it's your strategic backyard. That's when you have made it a strategic backyard. Otherwise, the Chinese will come over. The Chinese are already making inroads in this region. So let's say the Chinese deploy 10 ships in this region, but India has 200 ships here. That's what we need to that's the situation we need to make happen. So then India can trade without fear, and India can take care of all the security issues in this region. That's what India needs to do. India needs to invest in a massive navy. It will take time, but we need to start. And I think we have started to some extent. So I am not entirely, the level of disappointment is not that much. I'm actually I find the situation currently, what we have currently, kind of encouraging a little bit. Not the way I feel about the education system. The India, Middle East, Europe trade corridor, it's kind of a non-starter right now because of the war in the Middle East, the Hamas-Israel war. So let's see if the situation calms down in the future, we can start it. But right now, it's not started right now. Okay. What is it? What else do we have? Shantan Singh says, how do you see the future of Hinduism as demographic change is draining Hindu cultures? True. I think whatever demographic change we're talking about, whatever else we are seeing, I think it's a temporary thing. Our culture, what we call Hinduism, has existed for 10,000 years at least. I don't see, if you look at it from a pessimistic perspective, you may sometimes in your darkest moments feel that Hinduism won't last 100 years. Some people say that. I am by nature not a pessimistic person. I think Hinduism, or our culture, it will obviously evolve over time. I think it will last at least another 10,000 years. And I think it will see a resurgence in the next 50 years. Major resurgence. Okay. And that is all going to be tied in with India's economic and military rise. And India's military rise doesn't mean something that's hegemonic in nature. India has never been a hegemonic civilization, never. Okay, so India needs to become a powerful military, massively powerful military, but not for hegemonic purposes, just to ensure the status quo in the region and to ensure justice in the Indian subcontinent region and the overall civilizational neighborhood. I think it's inevitable. India needs to just take the next 20 years very carefully, ensure that there's no major military conflict that we are embroiled in. If we can navigate the next 20 years carefully and successfully, no one can stop us. And with India's economic and military rise, we will see a resurgence, massive resurgence in Indian culture. Okay, and those who and even our neighbors, close neighbors, further neighbors, neighbors further apart, all of them will be strongly influenced by that, and they'll be drawn towards that again. So it's going to happen. I am pretty sure of that. I am very optimistic, and let's see how it goes. Okay. Okay, what else do we have? What else do we have? Possibility of India-USA war in the future. Uh, no, no. So the US, even if it wants to go to war with someone, it doesn't get involved directly. First of all, I don't see a conflict between India and the US. You may have these diplomatic problems and not sending Biden, even though he had accepted the Republic Day celebration and all that. That sort of those tensions will persist. But the Americans, I don't think, even if they want to go to war with India, they won't do it directly. They'll use a proxy. They have a wonderful proxy right next door to India, Pakistan. So why would they go to war with India directly? I mean, for decades, the Americans financed and funded Pakistani terrorism in India. So they won't do it directly. There will be no India-US war in the future. Okay, India will make sure that we have reasonably good relations. Of course, the US sees India as a long-term threat, long-term like 20-year, 50-year horizon, and they don't want India to rise. We know that very well. We understand that very well. The US is not a long-term well-wisher of India. That is very clear. We have to understand that properly. But I don't see a war happening. But they certainly will use proxies against India like they currently do. Like they currently do. See the situation in J&K right now. New spate of infiltrations, right? From Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Well, recently Asim Munir, the Pakistan army chief, was in the US like this week. Why does he have to go to the US? He met the Secretary of State Blinken. He met Victoria Nuland. Okay, nothing good can come out of that. The only utility that Pakistan has for the US is as a counterweight to India, as a proxy to hurt India with. And there's another proxy in the east, the the armed groups, rebel groups that are fighting the Burmese government, and they are also creating havoc in Manipur. And who supports the anti-Burmese government rebels? Well, guess who supports them? The answer is very clear. So I don't see a war, but they will use all kinds of proxy forces against India. All right. Yeah, of course, we agree. That's a major outcome that he would have wanted, Mr. Asim Munir. Rent smart. Why doesn't the current Hindu government free Hindu temples? Listen, I don't know. I mean, I've always said this, that India is a Hindu-phobic apartheid state, in which the indigenous religion and culture of India is treated as second class, or like some would say eighth class citizens. And every practitioner of a foreign religion has the right to mind their own business, do things as they want, run their own religious institutions. But the indigenous culture of India is shackled and enslaved, and all the proceeds of the donations to Hindu temples are stolen by the government and used for God knows what activities. So I think in certain states they have done this, but I think it needs to be done nationwide. So until that happens, India is the world's most Hindu-phobic nation. Okay, that is true. It's true. All right. Mm, what else do we have? Let's see. Okay, we have crossed 2 hours. I'll take maybe one or two questions maximum. And okay, what is this? Not a simp. Should India leave BRICS? It has become a dictator's hub with the possible integration of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran. Is there any possibility of Pakistan joining BRICS? Okay, look at BRICS: Brazil, India, China, South Africa, and Russia. Apart from China, Brazil, we have good relations with them. Russia, more than good relations. South Africa, good relations. Nothing wrong with them. I don't care if a country has a dictator or not. How do I care? As long as they are friendly with me, I'm happy. Saudi Arabia, dictatorship, yes. Monarchy. Monarchy is a dictatorship. But we have excellent relations with Saudi Arabia. So what's your problem? UAE, great relations with India. Yeah, they have a monarchy, a dictatorship. So what? Iran, good relations with India, not bad. They have Islamic rule, dictatorship, whatever. So what? My I just don't understand why Indians are emotional. We don't look at the world affairs from a national interest perspective. We look at the world from a moralistic perspective. Oh, they don't have democracy, so we should not be their friends. Their dictator is a great friend of India. Their dictator helps us. His interests align with my interests. So why should I not like him? Why do we have to look at the world from a moralistic perspective? There is no right or wrong in geopolitics. There is no morality in geopolitics. It's only about prioritizing your national interest. Look at the US. They prop up dictators all over the world. Look at the number of dictators they've propped up over Africa. Look at the number of people they've assassinated in Africa because they went against US interests. The US itself is a two-party state, by the way, and both parties have the same foreign policy. So it's essentially a mono. It's actually nothing, not very different from China, actually, the US. Okay. So how do I care if a certain nation has a dictator or whatever, or a king or a queen or whatever? As long as their interests align with mine and they are friendly towards me, how do I care? I think we should be part of such organizations. The only issue is Pakistan joining BRICS, which China may push through. If that happens, then it's great. Any organization, any multilateral organization that has India and Pakistan both as members is doomed to fail. Look at SARC. So if they bring Pakistan into BRICS, it's going to essentially paralyze BRICS. Okay, so if they want to kill BRICS, they should bring Pakistan in. That's how I see it. But when it comes to dictators, I just don't get India, the moralizing perspective of Indians. Oh, it's not right. There's no democracy. What is democracy? Where do you have democracy in the world? Do you have democracy in the US? A two-party state, just one step above a one-party system like China and North Korea. You call that democracy? Both parties have the same foreign policy. One of them uses bombers to flatten cities with black-colored bombers. The other one uses rainbow-colored bombers to flatten cities, but they do the same thing. Look beyond what the surface level of things. So I think India has excellent relations with the dictatorships in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Russia, whatever you want to say. And I'm happy we have excellent relationships with these dictatorial regimes because it's good for India. I don't care what they do in their country. And it doesn't mean that dictatorships are bad, by the way. India, for the longest time, had an imperial and monarchy system. Who was Lord Ram? He was the king of India. What is a king? A king is a dictator, by the way. Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, he was a dictator, but he was a great dictator, a benevolent dictator. So please stop looking at the world from a moralistic, simplistic, sheep-like perspective. Please evolve your thinking. All right, all right. I will take one more question. We have gone way beyond 2 hours. Anisha says CIA wants India to go towards Tibet if China goes for Taiwan. Is there a possibility of that? I don't know if CIA has said this officially, the Central Intelligence Agency of the US. They are the troublemakers in the rest of the world. The FBI is the troublemaker within the US. So I don't know if they have said this, okay? But if they want India to go towards Tibet, if China go towards Taiwan, My question is, what is right for India? It is we in India who will decide. It is our government that decide what is best for India. Eventually, I think Tibet needs to be free. Of course, it needs to be free. I had this podcast with Tenzin Sundu in which we discussed the entire Tibet issue. I would recommend you watch it. Uh, Eventually, we do want Tibet to regain its freedom. Tibet has historically always been free, and it's always been the buffer between India and China. So we do want this to happen, but is this the right time? Let's say China invades Taiwan in 2025. Is 2025 the right time for India to to free Tibet? That is a calculation that has to be done based on a number of factors. The current strength of the Indian military. Do we have expeditionary warfare capabilities far from India? Will we be able to resupply the troops if they reach Urumqi or Lhasa or wherever? Can we actually make inroads rapidly across the Tibetan plateau? The mountain warfare issue. What will China's response be? How will they be able to reinforce send supplies? They only have one rail line, etc., etc. Lots of factors to take into consideration. Will China be able to divert its military and fight a war in Tibet? Lots of factors. Okay, so personally, I'm not sure if 2024, 25, hypothetically, if it's the year of the invasion of Taiwan, I'm not sure if it may be the right time for India to make a move on Tibet. Maybe not. Maybe yes. I don't know. Uh, and ideally, we don't want a war for the next 20 years. Ideally, Tibet is already like it's been a long time since it's been annexed by China. So another 20 years won't do it too much harm. Ideally, we don't want a war for 20 years with anyone. Then nobody will dare to go to war with us if we grow our economy for the next 20 years. So that's how I see it. All right, this is the end of today's session. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I apologize once again to all of you whose questions I could not take. Obviously, you have thousands of questions coming up over here. But yes, we will keep on doing this Ask Abhijit show. This is the final episode of this year. Next year, I'm going to do way more episodes than I've done this year. I may even do some surprise episodes, impromptu episodes, possibly. We'll see how it goes. All right, so thank you so much for your viewership, for your support. I really appreciate it. I wish you all a great end of the year, a great year ahead, and we will meet again. And next year, you will see much more of me. All right, so take care, have a great time, and keep raising your standards.